Welcome to UO Today. I'm Barbara Altman, Director of the Oregon Humanities Center. Our guest today is writer Tracy Kidder. The best-selling author of many books, he's also a journalist and an essayist. Kidder's book, The Soul of a New Machine, celebrated for its insight into the world of high-tech corporate America, earned him a Pulitzer Prize and a National Book Award in 1982. His enormously influential book, Mountains Beyond Mountains, from 2003, follows Dr. Paul Farmer's efforts to grapple with poverty and medical care in Haiti and addresses such pressing issues as global health, human rights, healthcare choices, foreign policy, class struggle, and idealism. Kidder's latest book, Strength in What Remains, from 2009, chronicles a young man's journey from the horrors of genocide in Burundi to Columbia University and then back to his homeland to establish a medical clinic. Kidder has written numerous nonfiction articles for the Atlantic Monthly and for many other periodicals, including The New Yorker, The New York Times, and Granta. Kidder gave a talk about the life and work of Dr. Paul Farmer at the University of Oregon on March 1st, 2011. Mountains Beyond Mountains was adopted as the UO's common reading for 2010-2011 academic year. Tracy, welcome to UO Today.
Well, thank you.
We're so pleased that you were willing to come and talk to us. I wanted to ask you, first of all, given that we're on a university campus, about the Common Reading Program. Mountains Beyond Mountains has been adopted by many, many, many colleges and universities. What do you think what is the purpose of asking a whole bunch of students to read the same book?
Well, it varies from college to college, I've noticed. And everyone seems to do it a little differently. But to me, well, first of all, it's very gratifying for a writer, and publishers really like it. But I like the notion that living writers can have some connection with readers, particularly young readers. For me personally, it's been nice to feel connected to, youngsters. I don't have any more in my household, not that I've been closely connected, but I think there's potentially some value in that, in having, in a common reading, having something that you can talk about with just about everyone on campus, at least the ones who've read it. I think colleges are constantly looking for what they call community, and this might be one small way to cultivate that, it seems to me. But beyond that, I'm sorry, I'm a little lost.
In your experience with the colleges and universities where students have adopted this book as their common reading, has anything surprised you about what they picked up on, how they've reacted to the content of Mountains Beyond Mountains?
Well, I was surprised the first time a youngster college student whose book I was signing said, "Your book changed my life. It's like, your book is, awesome. It changed my life." And I thought, wow, changed your life? And after I heard this a few times, I thought, well, if you're a healthy 18 or 19-year-old and you don't have life-changing experiences at least once a week, something's probably wrong with you. But I think some of the questions I've been asked have been interesting, and I think maybe the most interesting were at the Coast Guard Academy, believe it or not. Students were extremely polite, of course, but some of them asked me questions that I thought you would get punished for asking.
What kind of questions?
Well, one said, "Sir, the United States has a policy that allows all Cubans who reach our shores to stay and sends all Haitians home. Do you think that's fair, sir?" That was pretty much a rhetorical question. And there were others like it. And afterward, I talked to the young officers who were teaching these students, and they said, no, we encourage this. Well, I thought this was kind of refreshing and encouraging.
Did you use that opportunity he handed you on a silver platter to make your point?
Well, he said, "Do you think this is fair, sir?" And I said, "No."
Well, good for you. Surely bringing you in, one of the points of it is to promote discussion.
Well, there wasn't much to discuss once he'd said it.
The content of this book and the story of Paul Farmer is a pretty extraordinary story. He's an extraordinary character.
Yes.
And you were initially hesitant to jump into this. I understand he was perhaps a little hesitant about having you write the book as well. Why did you go ahead and do it?
Well, his hesitancy was different from mine. I mean, he had, I think it's very hard. I would never let anybody do this to me, scrutinize me over a period of years. I think it's a difficult thing to endure. Although I do try as hard as I can to be a good guest in people's lives, I don't always succeed. I think my hesitancy had completely different origins. Mine was Haiti. It had shocked me, and as I said in my speech, Haiti was a revelation to me, but a sort of terrifying one. And I think, to put it briefly, I sensed, having met him there by accident, that first of all, that he would be someone really interesting to follow around, and certainly a good potential candidate for writing about. But at the same time, I sensed also that he would disturb my peace of mind, my conviction that I had, earned all my privileges as a privileged American. And of course, if you take a conviction like that to a place like Haiti, it crumbles the moment you ask yourself that very simple question: what if I'd been born Haitian? So I hesitated for a number of years, and then got back in touch with him. But once I was launched in this, from the moment I arrived at this it's more than a medical facility, this complex that he and his friends had built in this blown away part of Haiti in the Central Plateau, I began to feel exhilarated. And I think the origins of that come from, I wake up in the morning, I have been for some years reading the papers every morning, the actual papers, by the way, the New York Times, and because I live in New England, the Boston Globe. But, more and more I find it difficult to read them sometimes. More and more I find it difficult. The world seems to be governed entirely by violence and chaos, and it is, to me, exhilarating to know that there are effective counterforces. I don't for a moment believe that they will necessarily prevail, but just to know that they're there makes a big difference to me. I can't really explain that any further than just to say that it does. I don't regret for a moment having done this. It was difficult travel for me. I was getting a little on in years, but he was a lot more fun to travel with than I am, And when you get sick, he takes care of you.
He certainly pushed you hard, or you pushed yourself hard to keep up with him. The stories of the hikes out into the hinterlands to make sure that the patient is taking his meds, for example, or the grueling schedule in the travels to Russia. Yeah. It's a pretty demanding life he leads.
It is. Yeah.
One of the things I was really struck with in the book was reading the passages where you were very frank about that feeling of the way he challenges people in a peculiar way and leaves them feeling unsettled about their own convictions and their own role in the world. And I got the sense that it's hard to be with him at times.
It can be, sure. It's hard to be with me. I think it's look, he is a guy who disturbs your peace of mind. For many people's peace of mind. By the way, is why I wrote this in the first person. I wasn't trying to be self-revelatory. As a writer, I think that choosing a point of view is really a choice among tools. I'm digressing from your question, but maybe I'll get back to it. It was clear to me after a while that there was a problem here. It was actually my longtime editor, a guy named Richard Todd, pointed it out to me. In the fourth or fifth draft of this book, he said, there's a problem here. It's called the problem of goodness. And I think that problem is that, it's partly based on the fact that most of us tend to want to push away evidence of a virtuousness that exceeds our own. And, goodness provokes, and it makes us think about things we'd rather not think about. Platitudes comfort us. They create an unreal world that seems all right, when it's not all right. I think, sometimes he did irritate me, and I wanted to stand in for the reader, as a sort of every man, as we called it, who would acknowledge the kind of challenging fact of Paul Farmer. It would say at various points, in effect, I know this guy's beginning to make you feel uneasy. He's making me feel uneasy too, and here's what I think about that. Here's what I think about its causes. And ultimately what I was trying to do was to clear away irritating self-reflection and let you see what he was, for the reader, and let you see what he was doing in a clear way. You know, but I also wanted to make him real, you know, as he is. He's not a holy person. I mean, the problem with the whole notion of sainthood, he's often described as a saint, and perhaps he wouldn't mind being one, but the problem is that it's a way of dismissing a person in some ways. Oh, this is a person set aside by God, and we can admire that person, but we don't have to even begin to try to emulate him. And so then the basic message, which is a simple one, about the tremendous unfairness of the world, it gets lost in that. And it is his message seems particularly powerful to me since the lens of public health and medicine. One that this was the greatest surprise to me in doing this research, what a powerful lens it is. It never really occurred to me. And when you look through that lens at a lot of the world, it's very unsettling, you know, because we can all imagine ourselves sick. We've all been sick. And I think we can all imagine what it'd be like to have no clean water, no doctor, no nurse. And then to see, you know, the results of that is pretty horrifying.
It's led you to the other big project that you're talking about a lot these days, the book Strengthen What Remains, and we can get back to that in just a moment. But I wanted to ask you about the perhaps unintended timeliness on this book about Haiti. I know that people have wanted to talk to you by the hundreds since the earthquake in Haiti and all of the various challenges that the country is wrestling with as a result of that natural disaster. You're one of the people here in the States who really knows it well.
I don't know it as well as a lot of people, but for some reason they came to me. I know a few things that I think are worth saying.
Do you want to say any of them now?
Well, I think so. I mean, I think that we have to acknowledge the fact that, you know, as I was saying a little while ago to a friend, you know, history didn't begin 10 minutes ago. I'm really quoting Paul Farmer. There's a long history behind Haiti's vulnerability to things like earthquakes and to cholera epidemics, the most recent catastrophe to visit Haiti. And that history is really pretty unsettling, disturbing. It begins with slavery. And it also, in more recent times, has roots in the fact that Haiti has, you know, more than 10,000 NGOs working there, non-governmental organizations that presumably are trying to do a good thing and help the Haitians. Not all of them are. My guess is that a majority of them aren't. Otherwise, there wouldn't be an issue surrounding cholera. Not long ago, there was a great. The Haitians, some Haitians, of course, were ready to blame the UN troops, who largely came from Sri Lanka, for bringing the cholera epidemic. And I don't blame the Haitians who did feel this way for feeling that way. They don't much like having these troops occupy their country. They had a lot of that for a long time. But for the international and national media to think that this could in any way be the real truth is, you know, preposterous to me. Cholera is caused by dirty water and beds and lack of sanitation. It's not caused by the introduction of a pathogen into a country. And there have been, you know, myriad NGOs working in Haiti, presumably spending billions and billions of dollars there. But and everybody who knows anything about public health, particularly in poor countries, knows that the very first thing and most powerful thing you can do is to clean up water supplies. So how come in all these years, no one except a few organizations like Partners in Health has gone about trying to do this? It's astonishing to me. And it's astonishing that but that's what platitudes do for us. We can sort of sweep that under the rug and feel good about all our noble efforts to stop the cholera epidemic, but there shouldn't have been one in the first place.
So the press coverage of the cholera epidemic right now is representing this.
I don't know if there's any coverage anymore of it, you know, and I'm not. I didn't do a real study of it. God knows there may have been some reporters who got it right, but it did strike me as being ignorant in the way so much that's thought and said and reported about Haiti has been ignorant over the years.
You spend a fair amount, especially of the book, especially in the early pages, in talking about that kind of undoing of myths behind trying to understand why the Haitians are suffering from so many terrible stressors for their health and their society. And so it doesn't surprise me now that you're kind of taking apart the coverage of that particular epidemic and looking for ways to try to direct us back at the real cause rather than
yeah, I mean, AIDS was the great example. You know, there were all kinds of people, including people who certainly should have known better, who are actually suggesting that the AIDS epidemic might have originated in Haiti, which is pure nonsense. It didn't, for one thing. I remember a story about a young Haitian in a Boston public school whose teacher told him that Haitians had created the AIDS epidemic because Haitians had sex with monkeys. And this little boy raised his hand and said, "But teacher, Haiti doesn't have any monkeys."
That's out of the mouths of babes.
Yeah,
huh?
yeah.
That's a great line.
But I have to warn you, I can clear whole rooms on the subject of Haiti. It's you know, I mean, it's in some ways a wonderful place, and I don't mean to make it sound like a completely tragic place. They're very proud people. They have been. I think the earthquake was really a huge blow to them. They have been a proud and optimistic people for a long time, and what they're proud of is the fact that they abolished slavery. They're the people who abolished slavery, and they've been punished for it ever since. I never met with anything but great generosity among the poorest of Haitians. And you know, and poverty is not the best way to generate generosity, it seems to me usually. But they're beautiful looking people as a rule, unless they're starving to death.
Let me ask you about the title. You chose Mountains Beyond Mountains as the title for the book.
Yeah.
It evokes the landscape that you move through with Paul Farmer, but it's also a pretty powerful metaphor for some of the things you're talking about. Are you willing to discuss how many metaphorical ways you were using that expression?
Well, it was something he told me about originally. Day mon gamin, which is Haitian Creole for, it's the favorite, probably the most commonly used Haitian proverb. They have a lot of proverbs, the Haitians do. And it means, beyond mountains there are mountains. The Haitians, as I understand it, use it in a lot of different ways, or as Farmer said, a zillion different ways. But I think two ways primarily. One is to say that there's no end to obstacles, and the other to say there's no end to opportunities. And the two aren't necessarily inconsistent. And it seemed to me that it said something about the scale and difficulty of the work that Farmer was doing, which wasn't just in Haiti, after all, but also in Russia and Peru and a bunch of other places.
Can you talk a little bit about the connection between Mountains Beyond Mountains and the more recent book, Strength in What Remains? There's an anecdote where those two stories intersect.
That's right. My wife and I had gone to see Paul Farmer. He was living in a apartment at Harvard at the time, and he had just had a knee operation, pretty major knee operation, so he was laid up in bed. And we got to his apartment, and there was this guy there, black guy. But somehow I knew right away he wasn't American, originally anyway. He is an American now. But Paul said something to the effect of, Deo, this was the guy's name, Deo Gracias, talk to Franny. She's interested in refugees. And we talked. I didn't talk to him very much in that visit, but on the ride home, my wife told me what she remembered of the story he'd told her. And I thought, oh, that's quite a story. And then a few years later, I was, as usual, looking around for the next thing to write. And I'm not the really good company when I'm doing that. I'm in that stage again. And finally my wife said, with sort of consternation, why don't you go talk to that guy? So I did. And it turns out that he had been I don't know if exactly a protege of Paul Farmer's, but he had, Deo, whose story is, I'll give it to you as quickly as I can. He was a young medical student in the country called Burundi, small East Central African nation that devolved into ethnic civil war in 1993. he escaped from the onset of it because he'd left the door to his room open, and the men who would have killed him thought he'd escaped. And he made a 6-month-long escape, which took him first to Rwanda, where 6 months later the genocide began. He had to escape from there, and he escaped back to Burundi, and he, through a series of complicated events, ended up going to New York City with no money, with $200, no friends, no relations, no English, just French. And he lived there. Ultimately, he made a living by delivering groceries and sleeping in Central Park. And then he met this ex-contemplative nun. Anyway, it goes on, but he got essentially adopted by an American couple and went to Columbia University. Although that seemed like a demotion to him because he'd been already a medical student in Burundi. But after that, he was, or sometime, I think late in his time at Columbia, he was prowling through one of the libraries and he came across a book by Paul Farmer. And he was really struck by it. And he went to Boston to go to the Harvard School of Public Health for a summer, and he saw that Farmer was giving a lecture, and he met him. He went up to see him after the lecture, and he wrote him an email, and Farmer said, "Come on over." So he became a member of Partners in Health, the organization that book's really about, and a great friend, a great close friend of Paul's and other. Other people in the sort of hierarchy of that organization. That rather anti-hierarchical, but hierarchical nonetheless organization. So, and then he's gone his own way to some degree because the main thing he's done since then was to build a clinic and public health system in a village in Burundi, which has never seen anything quite like this before. It's a sister organization to Partners in Health. Has to raise its own money, but gets lots of help in other departments. And it's brought, the place is astonishing. And it seems almost a miracle that he was able to pull it off. But he is like Paul in the sense, this guy Deo Gracias, that he's rather charismatic. He has he has legions of friends in the United States and in Burundi. And the Burundians have responded pretty amazingly. And people have been coming from places like Congo and Tanzania to avail themselves of these services, which suggests that they don't really exist elsewhere. One guy came to see the clinic. Well, a bunch of people have, not because they were sick, but just wanted to see it. And Deo asked one of them why he'd come, and he said to see America, which is pretty amazing in this day and age, So that's the connection. And they're great friends still.
You've made the point in other interviews that this was an opportunity to shine some light on the situation of Burundi. As you pointed out, Rwanda, which is just north of Burundi, has had the bulk of international press coverage because of the
and the bulk of
there.
International aid.
And the bulk of international aid. Do you think that your book is helping raise awareness about what's going on in Burundi?
I don't know. I wouldn't mind if it did. Burundi's peace is very fragile still. One hopes. Ardently hopes that it will last. And I think that this Village Health Works is an instrument of peace. It's not the whole answer, but it's a beginning of something. I think that their slogan is "Where there's health, there's hope," and I think that's probably true. I might add that Burundi is traditionally quite a misogynist country. Women have gotten a pretty raw deal there, but this clinic has tremendous community involvement, especially by the women. So I think one has to keep hope, the realistic hope alive. After all, it would be a terrible thing for a person like me, privileged person like me, to declare despair on behalf of Haitians or Burundians. It's a beautiful country, with a tragic history.
You have a gift for finding a very compelling character on whom you can then build a very important story. And it sounds as though, at least in the case of these two books, one has grown organically out of the other. You said that you're currently in the process of figuring out the next project.
Yeah.
Can you say anything about where you're likely to go next?
I just don't know. I'm really probably going to stay here in the United States.
I had a question about that, actually,
please.
because until you turned your attention to Haiti with Mountains Beyond Mountains, you were writing America-based stories.
Yeah,
for the most
well,
part.
actually, they were very
Is that-
close to my home. They were getting closer and closer, and I thought it was time to get away.
So now you might be making the return, and
Yeah, I mean, I don't care where in America, but I think I want to come back to the United States. And I guess I mean, one of the great things about my job, at least the way I've been lucky enough to practice it, is that I've taken on very different subjects every time. These are the two most closely allied that I've ever taken on. And I mean, it's a great job. You get to change it every 3 or 4 years, but you still have the same job. You change the subject, keep the same job, which I truly love. It's not, and finding a subject is hard for me because, the subjects that talk well at cocktail parties, for instance, I'm wary of those. You have to feel some connection at some point. I mean, you have to feel, I really like to write about this, and I haven't run across that. Maybe because I've been talking too much and not listening enough.
last question, Tracy, we're running out of time, but one of the things that I've found really intriguing and endearing in other interviews of yours that I've watched is that you've written a lot of books, and you're very frank about saying that you don't like some of them anymore. But it seems as though you're still very much involved in the story of Paul Farmer. Is that accurate?
Well, there's only one that I really don't like, and that was my first published book, whose the title of which I won't even name. I mean, every book I've written was as good a book as I could make it at the time, or I wouldn't have let it get published, I hope. But yeah, I still am in contact with some of the people I've written about. But with Paul, you don't get out of his orbit easily, and that's because you really don't want to. So yeah, and I mean, I think it affected me in a way that other subjects haven't. Although, I'm still interested in public education in America and craftsmanship and so on. But this is more potent to me somehow.
Well, I'd say that by coming to talk about him here on the campus, you have brought integration, your interest in education, your interest in this particular project. And I'm so sorry to say that we have to close there. Thanks for taking the time to come.
Thank you.
It was great to talk to you.
Thank you.
We've been speaking with Tracy Kidder, author of Mountains Beyond Mountains and Strength in What Remains. His talk at the University of Oregon on March 1st, 2011 was co-sponsored by the Oregon Humanities Center and the Clark Honors College, among many others. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.